Steve Phelps didn't just have a rough day in court, he walked into a legal buzzsaw and got torn to pieces in front of a room full of stunned spectators. Day 7 of the explosive lawsuit between 2311 Racing, Front Row Motorsports, and NASCAR was supposed to be routine testimony. Instead, it became the moment the so-called leader of stock car racing found himself buried under the weight of his own emails. And the moment that detonated the entire room? An exhibit from attorney Jeffrey Kessler that hit harder than any wreck at Talladega. Kessler pulled up a message written by Phelps himself during the heated charter discussions. It didn't need interpretation. It didn't need spin. The words were blunt enough to stop the jury in their tracks. They are playing with fire. Lots of options, but all have the same theme. Pick a date and they can sign or lose charters. It is that simple. Read that again. Pick a date or lose your charters. That's not compromise. That's not honest negotiation. That's corporate muscle. It sounded less like a commissioner guiding teams and more like someone issuing threats from a back room with the lights off. Phelps tried to distance himself immediately. He stared at the jury and delivered the line he hoped would save him. That is not what happened. But Kessler cut him off with a single sentence. "We'll let the jury decide." That was the moment everyone in the courtroom felt the temperature rise. A top executive caught in his own words, insisting the meaning wasn't what the plain English said it was. And the attorney didn't even have to yell. The email was the knockout punch. But that was only the start of Phelps's unraveling. Because the next topic was money, massive amounts of money. And under oath, there was no escaping the numbers. Phelps admitted he earns $2.5 million per year, a huge jump from the roughly $1.6 million he pulled in before becoming commissioner. And that still doesn't include the bonuses, which, when added in, can push his annual compensation right up toward $5 million. Meanwhile, the teams, the very people who bring the cars, the drivers, the crews, the spectacle, have spent years fighting to stay alive. And then came the bombshell. Over the last 4 years, the France family, NASCAR's ruling dynasty, has paid itself nearly $400 million. Phelps tried softening that blow too, saying over 75% of it was taken by taxes. Even if true, that still leaves around $100 million in take-home cash. And try explaining to a small or mid-tier team why the people at the top can pocket 9 figures while teams scrape together sponsorships just to make it through the season. The optics were brutal. Then things shifted to track agreements and exclusivity deals. And here, Phelps seemed to suddenly develop selective amnesia. He wasn't clear on when these agreements began. He wasn't sure how far back they went. He wasn't certain on the details. But the courtroom wasn't buying it, because an older article showed these exclusivity arrangements were already raising eyebrows back in 2016, long before the current fight exploded. And here's what that means in practice. NASCAR pays tracks staggering amounts of money to stay exclusive. $311 million in 2024 alone. That includes around $130 million to facilities that aren't even owned by NASCAR. Why does that matter? Because, as economist Edward Snyder testified, these payouts are unnecessary. His expert analysis was clear. If tracks were allowed to host races for other series, they could expand their revenue, reduce dependency on NASCAR payments, and the sport as a whole would benefit from a healthier, more competitive event landscape. Instead, NASCAR funnels those hundreds of millions upward while teams operate on razor-thin margins. Snyder didn't sugarcoat it. He called the model inefficient, outdated, and deliberately structured to maintain centralized control. And then came the next-gen car. Phelps defended it as if it were his personal achievement. He claimed, "The racing is just better. It has accomplished what I hoped it would accomplish." Except the drivers, the ones who actually strap into the thing, have repeatedly said the opposite. He called it the safest car in motorsports. But that statement cracked under scrutiny, because the injury list keeps growing. Kurt Busch, whose career ended after a qualifying crash, Alex Bowman, Noah Gragson, Eric Jones, Cody Ware. Several drivers missed races, some with concussions, others with significant back injuries. Yes, the car survives huge impacts on paper, but drivers have said publicly that the forces transferred to them are worse. Safety isn't theoretical. It's physical, and the courtroom clearly sensed the disconnect. By this point, Phelps looked less like a confident commissioner and more like a man trying to patch holes in a sinking ship using words alone. But the courtroom drama wasn't finished. It was only warming up. Because the next witnesses lined up included NASCAR CEO Jim France and team owner legend Richard Childress. And if Phelps struggled to maintain control, the next phase threatened to expose even deeper issues. Childress, in particular, was a powder keg waiting to go off, decades in the sport. No filter, no patience for corporate games. He's not even a plaintiff in this lawsuit, but he's been signaling support for the teams challenging NASCAR's business model. Phelps's testimony, meanwhile, pulled back the curtain on just how top-heavy the structure really is. Those exclusivity deals he couldn't fully recall weren't footnotes, they were the backbone of NASCAR's leverage. Snyder's analysis made it plain. NASCAR uses those deals to lock down tracks, preventing other racing series from gaining ground. Tracks get paid to stay loyal, teams get locked into a system they have no real ability to challenge, and NASCAR retains control at every angle. Then there was the quote that started this entire firestorm: "Pick a date and they can sign or lose charters." That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't a draft. That wasn't taken out of context. It was a window into how NASCAR leadership pressures teams to accept whatever terms are placed in front of them. Sign the deal, or lose everything. Imagine being in that jury box, hearing Phelps deny the obvious, while the email sits projected on a screen. Imagine being a driver or team owner who has fought for transparency and finally seeing the system laid bare. And now, the tension is rising as the next witnesses prepare to speak. Jim France, a man whose family has controlled NASCAR for generations. Richard Childress, a man who's watched this sport evolve, stagnate, explode, collapse, grow, and nearly implode again. If Phelps's testimony rattled NASCAR's leadership, the next round might set off a full-blown earthquake, because the question echoing through that courtroom is no longer about one email or one executive or one car. It's about the system, a system where money flows upward, where teams take the financial risks, where drivers take the physical risks, and where the people at the very top decide who gets heard and who gets ignored. If NASCAR is truly a family, why are so many of its members in open revolt? Let us know what you think. Is this finally the wake-up call NASCAR's leadership has avoided for years? Or is this lawsuit just the first crack in a much bigger, much deeper foundation problem within the sport? Because when the people below stop staying quiet, and the people above get dragged into a courtroom, the truth has a way of coming out, loud, undeniable, and impossible to put back in the box.